Picture this. You are Real Madrid. You are, without a doubt, the biggest, most glamorous, most successful football club in the history of the world. The pristine white shirts, the towering cathedral that is the Santiago Bernabeu, the unmatched legacy of legends from Alfredo Di Stefano to Zinedine Zidane, all the way to Cristiano Ronaldo. But right now, you are watching your absolute greatest rival, Barcelona, completely and utterly dominate you. A city and a club that are practically programmed from birth to win suddenly cannot even remember what it feels like to hold a meaningful trophy. So what exactly do you do when the walls are closing in and the pressure becomes unbearable? You hit the panic button. You go back in time, and you call the one man who has actually done this before. You call the one man Barcelona actually fears. I'm telling you, the return of José Mourinho to the Santiago Bernabéu isn't just a fascinating football story, it is a cinematic, high-stakes drama that we just have to unpack in this explainer.
But look, to truly understand the cure, we first have to deeply understand the disease that was infecting this club. Things behind the scenes hadn't just gone a little bit stale. They had completely broken down to a level of unprecedented, unbelievable toxicity. I mean, reports were leaking to the Spanish press that Real Madrid had literally turned into the Fight Club. And no, that wasn't just some clever metaphor. That was highlighted by an actual, physical altercation on the training ground between two of their own absolute core leaders, Aurelien Tchouameni and Federico Valverde. Just think about that for a second. These are seasoned professionals, these are Champions League winners, and they are literally coming to blows. This wasn't just a rough patch or a slight dip in form on a Tuesday afternoon. It was a fractured dressing room in absolute freefall, completely devoid of authority, completely devoid of respect.
And as you'd expect, the results on the pitch were entirely unacceptable for an institution burdened with the massive expectation of 15 European Cups. Real Madrid sat through 2 agonizing seasons with absolutely 0 major trophies. 0. No La Liga title, no Champions League glory, just a painful, completely empty void. Meanwhile, look at what was happening across the country in Catalonia. Manager Hansi Flick and teenage sensation Lamine Yamal were leading a soaring, modernized Barcelona to 5 of the 6 available domestic trophies over those exact same 2 seasons. 5-0. Winning isn't merely a hope in Madrid, guys. It is a rigid, absolute, non-negotiable expectation. The gap between the two giants was widening at a terrifying pace, and the emergency sirens were blaring all across the Spanish capital.
So let's dive into the Real Madrid emergency. Because the chaos wasn't just physical fights on the training ground, it was deeply, strategically political. Behind closed doors, the players were holding these intense crisis meetings, completely bypassing the coaching staff entirely. Star winger Vinicius Jr. allegedly got exactly what he wanted when highly touted manager Xabi Alonso was unceremoniously sacked after just 7 chaotic months in charge. And then you have Kylian Mbappé. This is the club's ultimate marquee mega signing, the player they literally chased for years. But he was not feeling the love. He looked like a strange, disconnected body in the squad, completely isolated from the tactical system. I mean, 3 different managers couldn't make the Mbappé and Vinicius partnership actually function on the pitch. The inmates were truly running the asylum, and the board suddenly realized they were completely losing their grip on their own team.
So they make the call, but I need you to understand just how wild this is. 4,380. That is exactly how many days had passed since José Mourinho last managed a competitive game for Real Madrid. A staggering gap spanning well over a decade. And think about what has happened in that decade. Football completely evolved. Tactics drastically shifted. Entire empires rose and fell. Bringing him back was a massive, absolutely unprecedented swing for the fences by the club. It was this desperate bridge between a legendary, nostalgic past of ruthless efficiency and a chaotic, terrifying present. Which brings us to our next chapter, the special one returns. Because you need to know that hiring José Mourinho in 2026 wasn't just some tactical football move to fix a leaking defense. No, this was a calculated, utterly desperate political gamble by club president Florentino Pérez. Perez has always had this unique soft spot for Mourinho, right? He views him as the one manager he truly genuinely respects above the constant noise of the players. He needed an iron fist. He needed a lightning rod who could step in and take the immense pressure off the boardroom. Above all, he needed a manager with absolute zero tolerance for insubordination to finally fix his broken, ego-driven dressing room. The timeline of how this actually unfolded behind the scenes is just pure political theater. So, in December 2025, Xabi Alonso is sacked, and club legend Álvaro Arbeloa takes over as a temporary interim manager to stop the bleeding. Fast forward to May, and Perez unexpectedly calls a presidential election.
Out of nowhere, a rival entrepreneur named Enrique Riquelme steps up with a massive threat, promising to sign Manchester City's Erling Haaland if the members vote for him. So, what is Perez's countermove? He stands right in front of the socios, the voting members of the club, and makes bringing Mourinho back his central, highly emotional campaign pledge. And it worked. It was a massive hit with a desperate fanbase. Perez wins the election in June, but here is the catch. Because of that delayed political timeline, Madrid entirely missed a cheap €6 million break clause in Mourinho's contract. Instead, Perez was forced to swallow his pride and pay a staggering €15 million release fee to Benfica just to get their man in the building.
But let's be honest about something for a second. The sheer risk of this $15 million gamble is astronomically high. The numbers recently have simply not been kind to Mourinho. Before this incredibly dramatic return, it had been 11 long years since his last league title. His last piece of silverware? That was the inaugural Conference League with Roma back in 2021. In fact, he had been effectively sacked in 5 of his last 6 jobs across Europe. And if you look deeply at his time at Tottenham Hotspur, it wasn't just a string of bad results. It was a total, catastrophic culture breakdown. By the end of his Spurs tenure, the dressing room fractured into 3 distinct camps. You had fierce loyalists, you had those who actively resented him, and you had a numb majority who simply stopped caring altogether. So you really have to ask, is Madrid risking their own fragile culture by injecting this kind of volatile, combustible energy?
That takes us to the big debate. Tactical masterclass or outdated? Because modern football has changed massively since Mourinho's absolute peak years. The game today is built on intense, highly coordinated high pressing, fluid positional play, and suffocating possession. Mourinho, on the other hand, well, he made his legendary name on rigid structure, absolute control without the ball, and unbreakable, almost cynical defending. So, the biggest question tactical analysts across the globe have right now is this: can his pragmatic, old-school methods actually survive, let alone consistently win, in 2026?
Well, Florentino Pérez is certainly giving him all the tools to try, backing him incredibly aggressively in the transfer market. Just look at the profiles of these newly acquired names: Ibrahima Konate, Denzel Dumfries, Marc Cucurella, club record defensive signing Yan Diomande, and Bernardo Silva. The brilliant playmaker Mourinho reportedly pushed for the absolute most. These aren't just your typical flashy Galacticos meant to sell a million shirts. No, these are experienced, physically robust, win-now soldiers built for an absolute trench war. This is a Mourinho squad through and through. I mean, they even tried to go bigger. They laughed in the face of financial logic with a massive $150 million bid for Julian Alvarez, which a very stubborn Atletico Madrid immediately rejected.
Okay, so how do all these combative pieces actually fit together on the pitch? Let's break down his in-possession tactics against a stubborn mid-block. Step 1 involves opting for a back 3 build-up, specifically utilizing young Dean Huijsen centrally for his truly elite ball-playing ability. Step 2 sees this major asymmetrical shift that is fascinating to watch. Dumfries pushes aggressively high and wide down the right flank, almost playing like a traditional winger, while Cucurella tucks inside on the left side to provide much-needed midfield cover. And this brilliant shape perfectly sets up Step 3, allowing Jude Bellingham to push incredibly high as a true number 10. Bellingham stays glued to the forwards to act as an extra, dangerous box threat, while Bernardo Silva drops deep into the midfield pivot to dictate the tempo and thread those killer line-breaking passes.
And out of possession? Man, here is where it gets really fascinating. Mourinho is actively trying to solve the massive, glaring defensive dilemma of playing both Vinicius and Mbappe on the same pitch by employing a highly risky front foot press. Mbappe is specifically instructed to press the opposition's left center back, and Vinicius joins in to press the right center back. They are actively aiming to cut out passing lanes to the wide areas and forcefully funnel play strictly through the congested center, right where Bellingham and Valverde are waiting to ruthlessly pounce on the ball. But here is the massive risk. If their pressing angles are off by even a fraction of a second, the opposition fullbacks are left in absolute acres of open space, drawing Madrid's entire defense completely out of position. It's a high-wire act. It requires absolute, exhausting perfection.
Which perfectly segues into egos, superstars, and friction. Let's be real. At the Bernabéu, tactics on a whiteboard are only half the battle. Mourinho is inheriting an active powder keg of a dressing room. Can he actually manage the colossal, world-dominating egos of Vinicius, Mbappe, and Bellingham all at once? Getting them all pulling in one single direction, tracking back and sacrificing for the team without the dressing room completely imploding is going to be his absolute greatest challenge. Mourinho historically goes deep into the minds of his players. It's this insane psychological intensity that can either make a squad run through literal brick walls for him or make them absolutely despise him.
And to make matters even more complicated, there's already some lingering history to overcome before a ball is even kicked. Just months prior, when Madrid actually played Mourinho's Benfica in European competition, Vinicius Jr. alleged that a Benfica player used a slur against him, a slur that was later confirmed as homophobic. Following the match, Mourinho defended his player by invoking Benfica legend Eusebio, a comparison which reportedly did not go down well with Vinicius at all. Now, while sources close to the club firmly insist the Brazilian superstar has absolutely no problem with Mourinho's arrival, any repetition of Mourinho's trademark psychological mind games could very easily trigger an absolute catastrophe in an already fragile dressing room.
Which leads us to the first real test. All the boardroom maneuvering, all the endless tactical theories, and all the intense media hype were finally put to the ultimate test on the grass. Mourinho's first game back in charge was a tense, gritty, unforgiving matchup away against a very resilient Espanyol side. This was the moment the entire football world was waiting for.
And what an absolute emotional roller coaster it was. Just 9 minutes in, and the tactical tweak instantly pays off. Jude Bellingham, operating dangerously close to the goal just like they drew it up, scores a towering header from an Arda Güler cross. There is pure elation on the bench. But the joy doesn't last long at all. Madrid's pressing intensity drops just a fraction. Old, haunting flaws suddenly resurface. Espanyol capitalizes and equalizes, severely exposing Madrid's defensive vulnerabilities on the counterattack, and for agonizingly long stretches of the second half, Madrid looked completely unable to penetrate the center of Espanyol's disciplined, stubborn, low-block shape. The tension radiating from Mourinho on the touchline was palpable. You could practically cut it with a knife.
But then, in the 90th minute, we get pure, unadulterated drama. The savior of the day wasn't the $100 million man Mbappe. It wasn't the Ballon d'Or contender Vinicius. The winner actually came from 21-year-old Carlos Espiani. Now you might be asking, who? He's an unknown, old-school, highly physical number 9 signed from Levante. And here is the truly fascinating part of the story. Espiani actually lives in a room at the Valdebebas training ground, and he shares breakfast with Mourinho every single morning. When a scrappy, desperate move broke down in the penalty box in the final seconds, it was the young Espi who fiercely forced the ball over the line, sending the Madrid bench into absolute pandemonium and securing a vital, heart-stopping 2-1 victory.
So we are left with the ultimate question: box office or bust? Mourinho survived his first immense test, absolutely, but the mountain he still has to climb is monumentally high. He has to comprehensively fix a totally broken culture, perfectly balance a top-heavy tactical system, and somehow dethrone a historically good, relentless Barcelona team that is currently showing absolutely zero signs of slowing down anytime soon.
I think former Champions League winner and pundit Owen Hargreaves hit the nail perfectly on the head. He said Real Madrid is going to be absolute box office television this season. Hargreaves directly compares Mourinho's demanding win-at-all-costs mentality to that of the legendary Sir Alex Ferguson. He doesn't let you cut corners. He puts intense daily demands on you, and if you can't cope with the heat, you're out the door. Simple as that. At a club like Real Madrid, pressure isn't a burden, pressure is a privilege. They desperately needed someone who inherently understands that winning is literally the only metric that matters in this city.
And speaking of winning, let's not forget the exact reason why Florentino Pérez trusts him above all others to navigate this massive storm. 100. That is the record-shattering number of points Mourinho achieved in that legendary 2011/2012 season with Real Madrid. Think about that. He didn't just win, he completely broke records doing it. His team scoring an outrageous 121 goals in the process. When the club was at its lowest point in modern history back then, staring up at an unstoppable, era-defining rival, Mourinho was the iron surgeon who stepped in and provided the ruthless cure. And you know, the poetic symmetry here is just impossible to ignore. History is practically repeating itself right in front of our eyes. Think back to 2010. Mourinho was brought in specifically to act as the ultimate disruptor, specifically tasked with taking down Pep Guardiola's unbelievably dominant, beautiful Barcelona. Now flash forward to 2026, and he is stepping into the exact same arena, facing the exact same daunting mandate: take down Hansi Flick's domestic-sweeping, completely unstoppable Barcelona squad. It's the same club, the same immense job, the exact same bitter rival. But the reality is, the man is older, the modern game is significantly faster, and the doubts from the media and tacticians have quite literally never been louder.
So I leave you with this to think about as you watch this incredible, high-stakes season unfold. Is this the perfect cinematic comeback, with the right man returning to remind the world exactly why he holds the title of the Special One? Or has football moved on so much that this is the one job that simply cannot be fixed? Let me tell you, keep your eyes on Madrid. It is going to be an unbelievable ride.